this drive shaft does not want to come out. It appears from the parts list it's supposed to come out as an assembly, and this is supposed to slide out of the front bevel gear unit or differential, but it doesn't. And the one on the other side basically came apart like that, which makes me think maybe that spline shaft that I can see in all that grease is supposed to be retained in there by something, and that gave way and it wasn't supposed to come apart like that. But what was left behind on the other side, this section here, will also not come out of the other side. So I've decided I'm going to try and take the whole bevel gear unit or differential out with the shafts complete. I think I'm going to be able to slide it out the other side, but I've got to disconnect the drive shaft, the front drive shaft, to do that. And the easiest way to do that is to remove the screws, 2 Torx screws here, pull this aside. You can actually see the bolts that attach that. So it looks like if I can get those 14mm bolts out, I could probably disconnect the drive shaft right there. Then also, by removing this out of the way, I also exposed the lower bracket that holds the drive shaft in, the differential in. Okay, it looks like disconnecting the front drive shaft from the front bevel drive unit is fairly straightforward. Get these 3 bolts, take the nuts off. The bolts then will slide forward. Not quite enough to disengage completely, but the shaft is designed that a spline section actually goes into this female spline section here, so this actually slides out, and now that's disconnected. Now I'm going to have to remove this lower mounting bolt, which is a through bolt, goes all the way through to the other side, and then there's an upper one which is partially obscured by the coolant hose on this side, but I'll get a wrench in there somehow. Here's a couple of unpleasant surprises when you're removing this front bevel gear assembly. The bolt, the long bolt that actually holds in the rear of the assembly. This is the bolt side. The bolt actually came out this way. It actually interferes with this part of this bracket for the lower arm, and I found that luckily with the drift pin you can tap it and exert just enough force to slide it past here and it pops out. That's the good news. Bad news is on this side, the upper one, this coolant hose is in the way, but you can actually push the hose. It's spongy enough, you can push the hose out of the way and get it past there, only to have it, I don't know if you can even see it, have it stop because it's hitting the back of the arm right here. So I don't see any other way to get this out other than to remove this upper A arm, or whatever the heck they call it. Two nuts and bolts removed, and the upper arm comes right out. And that exposes the bolt the bolt I was explaining about. Right here is where that arm was just mounted, and there's the bolt. So now, hopefully, yeah, just like the other one, it just barely clears the bracket. Well, things aren't going well. This front bevel gear unit or differential, I can't get it out. Tried like heck, and it seems like no matter which way I shift it or move it, something seems to get in the way. At one point I thought maybe if I remove the inner tie rod end, so I actually have the entire tie rod is out now. It was hitting on this a lot, so I figured if I got that out, maybe that would do it. But even with that and turning the wheel all the way, it seems like no matter which way I jiggle it or juggle it, I can't get it to fit through the frame over here. It keeps hitting this arm, the support, one of the upper supports for the A-arm, or whatever you want to call this upper arm. So, and that's welded on, so that can't be moved. And then of course I'm limited by the frame here, and the frame here, and the frame there. So seems like if I had been able to remove both of these axles the way it appears that they're supposed to come off, if this assembly was off on both sides, I could probably rotate it enough to slip it out and get it through here. So maybe that was the intention of the manufacturers for servicing this. The only other possibility I see at this point is going through the front. I can't go through the bottom because even if I take this skid plate, which looks like it was some kind of aftermarket deal because it's held on with these U-bolts that some are snapped, even if I take this plate off, the frame's too narrow for it to drop down through the bottom, so that's not going to be the answer. But I noticed that in the front you can actually see the frame bows out on both sides, widens, so that looks like a logical place for it to come out. The only problem with that is the radiator's in the way, and to get the radiator out you've got to remove this whole front push brush guard assembly. So before I start tearing into that, I'm gonna see if I can get some answers from somebody else with a little more experience on these, and just make sure that I'm on the right track before I go tearing that all apart. Okay, back at it, trying to get these CV joints, inner CV joints out. They're still stuck in that front bevel gear assembly. I tried a few different things and I can't get either one out. This one's just the inner joint is left stuck in there, and on the other side the half shaft is in there. And I tried pulling on that, and all I did was pull off the outer CV joint. So that came off. So doesn't seem like I can get these out. Picked up rented a puller and tried a number of different things to try and use that big puller, slide hammer puller. And unfortunately, no matter what configuration I use, these jaws won't grab it. Of course, Arctic Cat has a special tool that you can buy that fits right over that, apparently, from what I saw on one of the websites. But not going to invest in that tool for one job, and I can't figure out another way to hook on to that anyway, because I was going to chain the truck up to one side and then try and hook on to one from the other side and use the tractor or maybe even the backhoe or another truck and give it a yank that way, and I'm sure that would make it come apart. So what I've decided I'm going to do, since none of that seems to be working or workable, I'm going to try and split the case. So I've got the upper mounting bolt out so I can swivel it up enough to get to those lower bolts, which are, I already started one. Usually those are hidden by the frame, and then get all those out, and hopefully that whole side of the case will slide out this way with the inner CV joint still attached to it. Okay, I got it out, but it wasn't how I thought I was going to get it out. All the bolts came out no problem, and then it wouldn't split. The case wouldn't split. Something still holds that together. So maybe you have to have the CV joint out before that will come off. At least that's what I'm assuming at this point. So then I went back to one of my original thoughts of trying to just wrestle it out of the frame, and what I ended up doing was I took off the other tie rod end up underneath there on the bottom of the steering column, and that gave me a little more wiggle room, and I just messed with it and slid it all the way back and tried it a whole bunch of different angles, and then finally it just slipped back far enough so I could tilt it out past the frame components that were in my way. So I got it out. So now I still got the original problem of getting these shafts out, but at least now maybe I can put it on the bench and figure out another way to go at it. Just wanted to mention one more observation. When I split this case and removed all of the screws, I was able to slide this about a ½ inch open. I could see an O-ring in there that acts as a seal, but interesting thing is not a drop of oil came out of this unit. So I have a bad feeling that this thing was run dry for a while.